palpable unease crept beneath the luxurious veneer. Agatha Marple stood by the window, her eyes scanning the passengers, their casual postures betraying none of the tension that hung thick in the air, like an invisible weight pressing down on them all. The bright afternoon sun had long since disappeared, and with it the last semblance of comfort had been replaced by a creeping sense of menace that refused to dissipate. Slipping the strange note into her pocket, Agatha's face remained a picture of calm, yet inside, her resolve had deepened. Whoever had orchestrated Dr. Harrington's disappearance and sent her this warning was watching, and Agatha Marple was determined to turn the tables. The luggage car was a world away from the opulent salons of the train, bathed in a dim flickering light that cast long unnerving shadows across the neatly stacked trunks and crates. The rhythmic clatter of the train's wheels was hypnotic, broken only by the occasional creak of shifting luggage. As she moved quietly down the narrow aisle, her sharp eyes darted from one corner to another, her instincts honed through years of careful observation sensing that this was no ordinary search. There was something here, something hidden, awaiting her discovery. She crouched before a battered trunk, the initials HW hastily stamped on its side, her gloved fingers testing the latch. It opened easily, an oddity for a man so protective of his possessions. Just as she lifted the lid, a faint sound reached her ears, a whisper of movement, a scuff of leather on wood. Instantly, her body tensed, every muscle alert. She froze, her mind calculating the next move, the pulse of her heartbeat in her ears. Then, in a flash, the figure lunged from the shadows, an arm reaching out to grab her. But Agatha was faster. She sidestepped with a fluidity that belied her unassuming appearance, the figure stumbling forward with a curse, vanishing back into the dark recesses of the car. Her heartbeat slowed as she regained composure, her mind already assessing the situation. The trunks were overturned, a faint dusting of footprints left behind where the intruder had stood. Whoever they were, they had something to hide. And now so did she. The Grand Salon, once a place of leisure and polite conversation, now felt suffocating, its opulence overshadowed by the air of guarded suspicion that filled the room. The passengers, once comfortably ensconced in their pleasantries, now exchanged clipped words and furtive glances, their smiles strained and false. Sir Julian Blake, perched near the window with a glass of brandy in hand, appeared outwardly at ease, but Agatha noted the tension in his shoulders, and the way his eyes darted uneasily when he noticed her approach. She slid into the chair opposite him, her expression cool, her voice steady. "Sir Julian," she began, her words tinged with curiosity, "I've been meaning to ask, what drew you to sponsor Dr. Harrington's work? Archaeology seems an unusual pursuit for someone with your varied interests." His lips quirked in a faint, calculating smile, though his eyes held a guarded glint. "Ah, Miss Marple, you're as sharp as ever. Let's call it an investment in history, or perhaps an opportunity." His gaze met hers, and Agatha saw the flicker of something deeper, something that barely scratched the surface. "Opportunity," she echoed, leaning slightly forward. "Harrington had a knack for finding things others couldn't," he continued, his tone casual, but Agatha caught the way his voice tightened. His methods were unconventional, yes, but the results were often lucrative. Lucrative enough to risk a reputation. His smile remained, but it didn't reach his eyes. Agatha's own smile faltered slightly as she processed his words. "So you valued the financial over the personal?" she asked, her tone casual, but laced with subtle accusation. "I regret the loss of his work, but my involvement ended at funding his expeditions," Blake replied coolly, as though dismissing her probing. Agatha nodded, her gaze never leaving his, as she mentally noted the implications of his detached attitude. A man concerned only with financial gain would rarely mourn the loss of a colleague. Back in Harrington's cabin, the air was heavy with the remnants of chaos left by the earlier search. Agatha's practiced hands methodically sifted through the contents of the scattered luggage. Beneath the disarray, She found a hidden compartment in a leather satchel, and inside, a velvet pouch tied tightly with a silk cord. Unwrapping it carefully, she revealed a disc of polished obsidian, the very artifact Dr. Harrington had so dramatically displayed. But something was off. The weight was wrong, and the surface was too smooth, lacking the subtle imperfections that came with ancient relics. Holding it to the light, Agatha noticed faint, almost imperceptible machine marks along the edges. A counterfeit, she murmured, both amused and frustrated by the revelation. The implications were immediate and damning. If Harrington's prized artifact was a forgery, then what had happened to the real one? And who among the passengers knew enough to exploit it? Her mind whirled with possibilities, the walls of the Celestial Express suddenly feeling much too close. This was no ordinary theft. It was a carefully constructed deception, driven by greed and desperation. Slipping the counterfeit back into its hiding place, Agatha's thoughts raced, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place, but leaving her with more questions than answers. As she exited the cabin, the oppressive sense of being watched returned, the shadows around her stretching and shifting like living things, hiding secrets beneath their cloak. The train's opulent facade had begun to crack under the weight of its passengers' lies. The conductor's quarters were a stark contrast to the rest of the train, small, functional, and orderly, a reflection of the man himself. Agatha sat opposite him, the hum of the train filling the silence between them. As she studied him, her mind turned over the fragments of information she had gathered. There was more to this mystery than met the eye, and Agatha Marple, sharp-eyed and unyielding, was determined to uncover it all, no matter where the trail led her. The tension aboard the Celestial Express had reached an almost palpable crescendo. Agatha Marple's gaze lingered on the man seated across from her, his composed demeanor belying the strain evident in his every movement. Mr. Petro's weathered face, usually an open book, betrayed something more elusive today, a secret hovering just beneath the surface. She spoke softly, her words measured yet sharp. "You notice things, Mr. Petro. In a setting like this, one learns to listen, even when not directly addressed." Petro sighed, his fingers tapping anxiously against the edge of the table. Finally he spoke, his voice thick with hesitation. "I overheard Dr. Harrington the night he disappeared. He was arguing with someone in the corridor. I didn't see who, but the voices, they were heated." Agatha leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "And what did they say?" Petro's eyes darkened as he recounted the words. Harrington accused the other person of betrayal. He said something about the safety of the artifact. "If this gets out, we're all ruined." The implication hung in the air like a loaded gun, its weight sinking deep into Agatha's thoughts. She probed further. "And the other voice? A man or a woman?" "A man," Petro answered after a moment of contemplation. But his voice was low, almost a whisper, the kind of voice meant to fade into memory. Agatha's expression remained unchanged, but inside her mind raced. "A calculated voice," she murmured, her tone contemplative. The conversation shifted as Petro leaned in, his voice dropping. "This train, Miss Marple, it feels different, like it's carrying more than just passengers. Something dangerous is aboard." Agatha gave a small knowing smile. "Trains are curious things, Mr. Petro. They carry us, yet they also propel us into places we can't always control." Meanwhile, the dining car had fallen into an eerie quiet, the clinking of silverware now replaced by hushed whispers and nervous glances. A young steward had vanished without a trace, and rumors swirled in the air like smoke. Agatha's entrance brought a strange sense of calm, her presence a stark contrast to the growing panic. One woman, her voice trembling, whispered, "They found blood near the service car, a glove covered in it." Agatha approached Sir Julian Blake, whose usual poise seemed strained under the pressure of the mystery unfolding. His response to her casual observation about the vanishing staff was delivered with his signature smirk, but the sharpness in Agatha's gaze caught him off guard. "Perhaps we should disembark and save ourselves the theatrics," he quipped. Agatha raised an eyebrow. And yet you remain remarkably composed, Sir Julian. A trait born of experience, I presume. Experience teaches one not to panic, Miss Marple. It also teaches the value of keeping certain truths to oneself, he replied. His voice smooth, but the faintest hint of discomfort clouded his eyes. Agatha's reply was swift. Wise advice, though one must discern between wisdom and avoidance. As she moved through the corridors of the train, Agatha's mind remained focused on the web of deception unraveling around her. Her next stop was Madame Dobbs' cabin, where the elegant woman's poised exterior masked a world of secrets. The two women exchanged terse words, Agatha revealing a map hidden within Harrington's belongings, a map marked with Dobbs' initials. A professional interest, or something more profitable? Agatha asked pointedly. The tension in Madame Dobbs' eyes flared, and Agatha caught the subtle shift in her posture. You are clever, Miss Marple, Dobb warned, her voice laced with something almost threatening. Too clever. But be careful. There are things aboard this train that are best left undisturbed. Agatha's response was calm, but her mind was racing. Is that a warning for me, madame? Or for yourself? As Agatha left Dobbs' cabin, her thoughts churned with the implications. Every conversation, every encounter on this train, added another layer to the puzzle she was determined to solve. The Celestial Express, with its ornate decor and seemingly serene atmosphere, was anything but peaceful. It was a vessel carrying lies, deceit, and secrets too dangerous to remain hidden. The walls of the train seemed to close in on her, but Agatha knew she was getting closer to the truth. The Grand Salon was quieter than usual, its opulent charm tainted by the unease that now gripped its passengers. Dr. Evelyn Monteague, a woman not easily rattled, approached Agatha with caution. I believe we need to talk, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Agatha, always keen for insight, turned her full attention to the doctor. The truth was close now, and Agatha Marple intended to find it, no matter where it led. Dr. Monteague stood in front of Agatha, her figure tense with a palpable urgency that betrayed the weight of the secret she was about to unveil. The train car around them was empty, save for the hum of the wheels beneath them, and the occasional creak of the old weathered wood. Agatha regarded her quietly, a glint of curiosity in her calm gaze. I've been withholding the truth, Miss Marple, Monteague confessed, her voice low, almost hesitant. But recent events have shown me that keeping silent might cost us everything. Harrington was no mere fraud. He was reckless, entangled in dangerous dealings with someone even more dangerous. Roland Vasa. She paused, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if to steady herself against the weight of her admission. I don't know all the details, but I overheard enough to know that Vasa wasn't just a name. It was a thread that tied everything together. I have reason to believe Vasa's dealings are the key to Harrington's disappearance. Agatha's gaze didn't falter. She listened intently, her mind beginning to work. And you believe these dealings have led to Harrington's fate? She asked, her voice steady, but imbued with an unmistakable undercurrent of intrigue. Monteague's voice cracked slightly with emotion. Yes, I may have despised him, professionally, but I never wished him harm. All I want now is justice, Miss Marple, not just for him, but for the truth to come to light, no matter what the cost. Agatha studied Monteague, her expression unreadable. Beneath her measured composure, Agatha's mind raced through the implications of Monteague's revelation. Justice, Agatha murmured softly, as though considering the weight of the word. It's a noble pursuit, but one that is often clouded by shadows, don't you think? The truth is rarely as clear as we might hope. Monteague bit her lip, her brow furrowing in frustration at the cryptic nature of Agatha's response. But before she could speak again, the train slowed as they neared a stop, and Agatha turned to leave, the weight of Monteague's words lingering in the air between them. That afternoon, Agatha made her way to the luggage car, her thoughts a maelstrom. The space was quiet, the faint smell of metal and polish hanging in the air, as if the train itself was holding its breath. The soft hum of the wheels was a constant backdrop, but it was the sight of an abandoned suitcase that caught her attention. The carelessness of it, or perhaps something more deliberate, struck her immediately. She knelt down, her practiced hands moving over the contents. A torn shirt, a discarded pair of shoes, and then, a small leather-bound journal. The name Vasa was scrawled on the inside cover, in a script that seemed almost too neat, too deliberate. As Agatha flipped through the pages, she was struck by the strange cryptic entries, transactions, purchases, and shipments of items that didn't quite make sense. It was clear that whoever kept this journal was involved in something far more illicit than Agatha had anticipated. But what truly caught her attention was a single entry that sent a chill down her spine. Harrington insists on keeping the disc. Too dangerous to move. Dubois remains the only option if things go awry. The connections were becoming clearer, the pieces of a puzzle that had seemed impossibly tangled slowly beginning to align. Harrington, Dubois, Vasa, all tied together in a web of mystery that only deepened the more Agatha dug. The journal was filled with cryptic notes and references to hidden objects, each entry suggesting a network of dealings far beyond the scope of the train. The journal was a map of secrets, and yet, the truth remained elusive. Night fell, and the train seemed to take on a new life. The dim light in the cabins cast long shadows, and the air felt thick with unsaid words. In her cabin, Agatha laid out all her findings, Montague's warnings, the journal, and the counterfeit artifact she had uncovered earlier. Her mind worked through the complex narrative that was slowly emerging from the chaos, piecing together the fragments of information she had gathered. It was clear that Dubois and Vasa were connected, but just how deeply their involvement ran was still a mystery. Harrington's ambition had led him into dangerous territory, but whether he was the victim of a deeper conspiracy, or a willing participant in his own downfall, remained unclear. A knock at the door interrupted her thought. Montague stepped inside, her eyes shadowed with uncertainty, but her voice steady with resolve. "Do you believe me, Miss Marple?" she asked, her words heavy with the weight of her fear. "Do you think Vasa and Dubois are behind all of this? Are they responsible for what's happened to Harrington?" Agatha paused, her gaze fixed on Montague as she considered the question. "I believe there is truth in what you've said, Dr. Montague," she said slowly, her voice quiet but firm. "But as with all truths, they are rarely pure and never simple." Montague looked at her, the frustration evident on her face. "So what do we do now?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. Agatha's expression softened, but her eyes remained sharp with determination. "We wait," she replied. "The truth always has a way of revealing itself, but sometimes it requires encouragement." With that, Montague left, the tension between them hanging in the air, and Agatha turned her attention back to the journal, her mind whirling with the implications of the tangled web she was now entangled in. The grand salon was unusually quiet the next evening. The once jovial atmosphere had been replaced by a heavy, almost oppressive silence. Agatha stood at the center of the room, her small frame radiating quiet authority, as she prepared to confront the truth head-on. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice cutting through the silence with a calm intensity. "We are all aware that the disappearances of Dr. Harrington and now a steward have cast a shadow over our journey. But I would like to remind you that shadows, when examined closely, often reveal far more than they conceal." Her gaze swept across the room, locking momentarily with Madame Dubois' cold, calculating stare. "Madame Dubois," Agatha continued, her voice firm and sharp, "I wonder if you might enlighten us all about your relationship with Roland Vasa." The room fell into an uneasy hush, all eyes on Dubois, whose composed exterior cracked just slightly. She raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, her cigarette holder poised between her fingers with practiced elegance. "Miss Marple," Dubois replied, her voice smooth as velvet, but with a trace of defensiveness. "I do not deny that my work as a collector has occasionally brought me into contact with Mr. Vasa, but to imply there is more to it, well, that is quite a leap, wouldn't you agree?" The room buzzed with whispers, and Agatha's sharp eyes never wavered from Dubois, the wheels turning in her mind as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The tension in the room was unbearable, but Agatha remained calm, knowing that the truth, however dark it may be, was inching ever closer to the surface. She would uncover it. The train, once just a mode of travel, had become the perfect stage for deception and betrayal, and Agatha Marple would leave no stone unturned until the final act was revealed. As the train swayed gently along the tracks, Agatha sat in the corner of the dimly lit compartment, the silence around her thick with tension. Her thoughts churned relentlessly, piecing together the puzzle that was slowly unraveling before her. Dr. Montague's confession still echoed in her mind, a stark reminder of how far-reaching the web of deception had become. The artifact, the mysterious Vasa, and the cryptic ties between Dubois and Harrington. They were all connected, but the true scale of the conspiracy eluded her grasp. Agatha had always known that in the world of secrets and lies, truth was often hidden beneath layers of smoke and mirrors. Yet, this was different. This wasn't just about a missing man or a stolen artifact. This was something darker, more sinister, and far more dangerous. The tension in the air was palpable as the train neared its destination, the rumble of the wheels on the tracks becoming a haunting prelude to the chaos that was about to erupt. In the midst of this uncertainty, Madame Dubois remained composed, her icy demeanor belying the suspicion that had begun to swirl around her like an approaching storm. When Agatha had confronted her, Dubois had responded with practiced calm, but Agatha had seen the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the smallest crack in her perfect facade. "Speculation is dangerous, Miss Marple," Dubois had said, her voice a smooth veil, hiding the unease underneath. "I suggest you tread carefully." But Agatha knew that in the game of lies, caution was the greatest risk. And yet, when truth is on the line, speculation is often the first step toward discovery. Agatha had replied, her voice unwavering. She had turned to the other passengers, her gaze sweeping the room like a hawk surveying its prey. "Madame Dubois admits her ties to Vasa, a name tainted by illegal artifact trades. Dr. Harrington was involved in this world too. Does it not follow that such connections could have played a role in his disappearance?" The room had erupted into murmurs, but Dubois had remained unnervingly still, her expression unreadable. Agatha had seen the truth flickering in the shadows, and now she could feel it drawing closer. That evening, as the train passed through the moonlit countryside, Agatha sought solace in the observation car. The rhythmic clatter of the train beneath her seemed to mirror the steady beat of her own heart. It was here, amidst the quiet, that she had hoped for a moment of clarity. But instead, a sound broke her concentration, a soft shuffle, almost imperceptible from behind. She spun around, but the car was empty. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled as a figure materialized from the shadows, lunging toward her with terrifying speed. Agatha barely had time to react, her chair toppling as she scrambled backward. The attacker was quick, his movements precise, but before he could strike again, a voice rang out like a shot. "Stop right there." It was Sir Julian Blake, his usual air of indifference replaced by a steely resolve. He brandished a heavy cane, advancing toward the assailant with authority. The attacker hesitated, then fled, disappearing into the next car. Agatha steadied herself, her breath coming in shallow gasps, but her mind remained razor-sharp. "Sir Julian, I owe you my thanks," she said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Julian offered her a rare smile. "It seems my cynicism had its limits tonight," he replied. "Are you all right?" "Quite," Agatha said, already processing the attack. "But this suggests our adversary is growing desperate. They know time is running out." The next morning, Agatha's instincts led her to Edward, the nervous steward whose trembling hands had caught her attention from the start. As she questioned him in a quiet corner of the dining car, his answers became increasingly strained, his eyes darting nervously. She pressed him, her voice soft but insistent. Finally, his facade crumbled. "I was helping Vasa," Edward confessed, his voice quivering. "But I swear, I didn't hurt anyone." My job was just to retrieve the artifact and make sure it got to him and Dr. Harrington. Agatha's eyes narrowed. And why did Vasa want Harrington's artifact so badly? Edward hesitated, then whispered. Harrington refused to hand it over. He insisted on keeping it. Vasa ordered me to follow him. But then he disappeared. I didn't expect it to go this far. I swear. Agatha absorbed his words, her mind already turning over the new information. You may not be the mastermind behind this, Edward, but you are still a part of it. Your role, though perhaps forced, does not absolve you from suspicion. Before Edward could respond, a loud commotion erupted in the next car. Agatha's lips tightened. The game was nearing its end, but the true mastermind remained elusive. As the train rolled forward, its smooth hum masking the storm brewing beneath the surface, Agatha retreated to her cabin, the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. She had a new realization. The killer's motives weren't just limited to theft or revenge. They intended to derail the entire train, destroying evidence and eliminating witnesses in one catastrophic act. The route the train was taking was perilous, cutting through steep mountain passes, making it the perfect setting for such a calculated sabotage. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but time was running out. That evening, Agatha entered the grand salon, her usual calm demeanor hiding the fire of determination within. The passengers were tense, whispers of danger floating through the air like smoke. She gathered them all, speaking with quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice cutting through the murmur, "this journey has taken a darker turn, but I believe I have a way to end this ordeal." Madame Dubois raised an eyebrow, her expression curious but cautious. "Do enlighten us, Miss Marple," she said with feigned interest. "We're all eager for resolution." Agatha held up a small box, its surface polished and gleaming in the dim light. "This box contains the final piece of the puzzle," she said, her eyes scanning the room, locking onto each individual. "The artifact that started all of this. It's time to stop hiding behind lies and shadows. The truth is about to come to light, and the storm will break tonight." The room fell into an uneasy silence, every eye on Agatha as she prepared to reveal the final act of her plan. The game was over, and the truth would soon be exposed. The killer had underestimated her resolve, and now they would pay the price. The train's journey was about to end, but Agatha knew that the real journey, the one into the heart of darkness, was just beginning. As the tension in the grand salon reached a fever pitch, Agatha Marple remained the picture of composure, her every movement deliberate, as if orchestrating the final act of a grand play. The weight of the unsolved crimes aboard the train had grown heavy with each passing hour, but now, standing in the center of the room, Agatha was ready to expose the tangled web that had ensnared them all. The train, cutting through the rugged mountain terrain, felt like a metaphor for the treacherous path they had all unwittingly walked, a journey that had brought them to this crucial moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Agatha began, her voice unwavering, a steady cadence that immediately commanded attention. "What we have witnessed aboard this train is no simple series of unfortunate events, no coincidental misfortunes or misunderstandings. What has unfolded here is a masterfully crafted series of manipulations, lies and deadly secrets, designed to lead us astray. But as with all mysteries, the truth cannot remain hidden forever." Her gaze swept over the room, making fleeting eye contact with each passenger, noting the subtle shifts in their demeanor, the way some of them looked away, their faces pale with the weight of the revelation. "The disappearances, the thefts, the deaths, they are all connected," Agatha continued, her voice growing firmer, more authoritative. "And these crimes point to one undeniable conclusion. The killer is not some outsider lurking in the shadows, nor some faceless figure beyond these walls. No, the mastermind is here among us, someone who has woven their charm and deceit into the very fabric of this journey, someone who has fooled us all." The room was dead silent now, every eye on Agatha, every ear straining to hear her next words. Madame Dubois, reclining in her seat with an air of detached elegance, did not flinch, though her fingers tightened ever so slightly around the edge of her wineglass. The faintest twitch of her lips betrayed a hint of unease, but she quickly masked it with a cold, indifferent smile. Agatha's sharp eyes never left her. "Madame Dubois," she said, her voice unwavering. "It is you." The room erupted in gasps, voices rising in shock and disbelief, but Agatha's calm demeanor remained unshaken. "You thought you could play us all," she continued, her tone slicing through the confusion like a knife through butter. "But I see through you, madame. Your connections to Roland Weiser were carefully concealed, your dealings in the illegal artifact trade expertly disguised. But the counterfeit artifact, the ruse you orchestrated to deflect suspicion, it all traces back to you. You thought you could frame others, hide in plain sight, but truth has a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it's buried." Madame Dubois' face remained impassive for the longest moment, her expression one of feigned disbelief, but the slightest flicker of panic danced in her eyes. "This is preposterous," she spat, her voice sharp, her composure slipping ever so slightly. "You have no proof." Agatha, however, was unflinching. "Oh, I have proof," she said coolly, her gaze never wavering. "The journal found in Dr. Harrington's luggage contained meticulous records of your dealings with Weiser, and more importantly, it revealed your hand in the plot to steal Harrington's prized artifact. The counterfeit piece you placed on the market was a clever diversion, but not clever enough. Your knowledge of the artifact and your ability to manipulate the players in this game make it clear that you are the architect of this whole scheme." The room was still, the silence pressing down on them like a physical weight. Madame Dubois' eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a tight, forced smile as she straightened in her seat. "You think you can accuse me without consequences, Miss Marple? Do you truly believe you have won?" Agatha did not flinch, nor did her voice betray the slightest hint of doubt. "Oh, I do not believe I have won, madame. I know I have won." The words hung in the air like a final, irrevocable sentence. "You played us all, thinking that your charm, your cunning and your ties to powerful people could protect you. But in the end, it was your overconfidence that sealed your fate." Madame Dubois' smile wavered, and for a brief moment, the mask slipped entirely. Her fingers trembled around her glass, her poised exterior cracking just enough for Agatha to see the desperation lurking beneath. "You're bluffing," she said, her voice low and threatening, but Agatha remained unshaken. "I never bluff, madame. The truth is always far more powerful than any bluff could ever be." The silence stretched, but it was not the uncomfortable quiet of uncertainty. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet that followed the revelation of a deep hidden truth. The weight of the moment settled over the room, the passengers frozen in place, each one processing the final act of this twisted drama. Sir Julian Blake, standing near the back of the room, watched the exchange with narrowed eyes, his earlier air of calm replaced by a subtle unease. He opened his mouth to speak, but Agatha raised her hand, her sharp gaze silencing him instantly. "This charade ends now," she declared, her voice firm and resolute. Her eyes moved to Montague, her trusted ally, and with a brief nod, he stepped forward, his hand resting on the revolver at his side. The room seemed to hold its breath as Montague leveled his gaze at Julian, his face grim. "Enough," he said, his voice low, but laced with the authority of a man who had seen enough to last a lifetime. "It's over." Julian Blake's face contorted, his mask of control slipping, revealing the anger and frustration that had been bubbling beneath the surface. He made a move, as if to reach for something hidden in his coat, but Agatha was already 2 steps ahead. "Don't even think about it," she said, her voice calm but final. Montague raised his revolver, his steady hand the embodiment of the quiet strength that had carried them through this ordeal. "The truth is finally out," Agatha said, her voice low but triumphant. "The game is over." The passengers, their faces drawn and weary, exhaled collectively, as though a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Outside, the train continued its journey through the mountains, the night dark and thick with the shadows of the past. Yet inside, in the grand salon, the light of truth had shattered the darkness, at least for now. As the train rolled on through the mountains, its wheels grinding against the tracks in a rhythm that was both relentless and calming. Agatha stood tall, a quiet force amidst the chaos, knowing that while the game had ended, the journey had only just begun. The Celestial Express had served as the perfect stage for this intricate tale of deception, betrayal, and murder. But in the end, it was Agatha Marple who had emerged victorious, her mind sharper and her resolve stronger than ever before. The tension in the room was palpable, as the weight of Agatha Marple's revelations hung heavily in the air. The Grand Salon had transformed into an arena of raw emotions, every passenger caught in the whirlwind of suspense that had swirled around them for days. Agatha's calm, unwavering presence was the only anchor in the storm of accusations and revelations. She stood before them, the leather-bound journal now resting ominously on the table before her. The golden light from the chandeliers reflected off her polished demeanor, casting an eerie glow that seemed to heighten the tension in the room. "Madame Dubois," Agatha began, her voice cool and collected. "This journal found among Dr. Harrington's belongings contains more than just his notes. It contains the keys to your dark secrets, detailed records of your dealings with Roland Vaser, shipments of stolen artifacts, including the very disc Harrington had been so proud to display. Your hands are stained with far more than just your apparent interest in collecting." Madame Dubois remained seated, her elegant poise unshaken, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes, a crack in the mask of confidence she had so carefully cultivated. "And what exactly does that prove, Miss Marple?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock amusement, though her fingers clenched the arms of her chair in a tight, almost imperceptible gesture of anxiety. Agatha's gaze sharpened as she took a step closer. "It proves your deep involvement in the black market, Madame, and it paints a much darker picture, one of calculated manipulation and treachery," she said, her voice steady, but carrying an edge of finality. "But there's more. The journal references not just one, but several shipments of counterfeit artifacts, elaborate forgeries meant to deceive eager buyers, to steal from those who believed they were purchasing genuine treasures. The very same forgeries you masterminded." A gasp rippled through the passengers as they processed the weight of Agatha's words. Madame Dubois' composed exterior faltered, just for a split second, but it was enough to expose her. Her lips curled into a tight, controlled smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You think you've unraveled everything, Miss Marple," she scoffed, standing slowly, her elegant frame towering over the gathered crowd. "I've played this game far longer than you could ever comprehend. You think you can trap me with these flimsy accusations?" Agatha's expression remained unchanged, unwavering as ever. "I don't need to trap you, Madame. Your own actions speak volumes," she replied. At that moment a shift in the room caught Agatha's attention. Madame Dubois' gaze flickered toward the door, an almost imperceptible movement, but Agatha was already steps ahead. She nodded subtly to the conductor, who stepped forward with a grave expression. "Madame Dubois," he said, his voice steady yet laced with authority, "I found this under your seat." The device in his hand was small, its exposed wires a stark warning. The faint ticking sound that emanated from within seemed to reverberate in the charged atmosphere of the room. Dubois' mask of control shattered completely. "You're clever, Miss Marple," she hissed, her voice suddenly low and venomous. "But cleverness can only take you so far." In a sudden, swift motion, she shoved the conductor aside and bolted for the door, her heels clicking on the polished floor as she made a desperate run for freedom. Agatha's reaction was immediate. Her unassuming presence belied her speed as she followed the fleeing woman, her every movement a fluid extension of purpose and resolve. The chase led them down the narrow corridors of the train, past passengers who had been oblivious to the unfolding danger. The engine room loomed ahead, its machinery roaring like a beast trapped in metal. There in the dim vibrating space, Madame Dubois was fumbling with the sabotage device, her hands shaking as she tried to conceal her actions, her desperation palpable. "Stop this madness, Madame," Agatha called, her voice rising above the din of the train's machinery. "You've already lost. Don't destroy more lives in your frantic attempt to escape." But Dubois was beyond reason, her face twisted with a mixture of fear and anger. If Fur finds out I failed, I'll be as good as dead, she spat. Her words sharp, laced with a desperation that only fueled the darkness in her eyes. Agatha took a step forward, her voice softening but still resolute. Perhaps, she said gently. But this path will only ensure your complete destruction. There was a hesitation in Dubois' eyes, the device still clutched tightly in her hands. In that fleeting moment of vulnerability, the conductor lunged, his strong hands reaching for the device. The ensuing scuffle was brief, but enough for the device to slip from her grip and fall to the floor. The ticking grew louder, each second a beat of impending doom. Agatha moved quickly, her hand steady despite the urgency. She knelt beside the device, her mind racing as she examined it with the precision of someone who had seen far too much danger in her time. The seconds ticked away as she worked, her fingers deftly finding and disabling the mechanism. The ominous ticking silenced at last. The room fell into an eerie stillness, the only sound the hum of the train as it continued its journey through the mountains. Dubois slumped to the floor, defeated, her defiance now crumbled to dust. The conductor stepped forward, securing her wrists, but Agatha's attention was already elsewhere. She straightened her skirt with a casual flick, her voice cutting through the silence. "A shame, madame," she said with regret. "You might have achieved great things if only you had chosen a different path." As the train neared its final stop, the passengers began to emerge from their cabins, the ordeal behind them, but its weight still palpable in the air. Agatha sat quietly by the window, her reflection merging with the passing landscape, her thoughts clouded by the long journey ahead. The truth had been uncovered, the danger averted, but the scars of greed, jealousy and fear would remain, as they always did. The train, once a vessel of intrigue and deception, had become a silent witness to the relentless forces that drove men and women to darkness. And as always, it was Agatha Marple who had ensured that the journey, however fraught with danger, would reach its destination safely, if not unscathed. The cabin felt like a pressure chamber, the air thick with a sense of imminent revelation. Agatha's gaze was unwavering as she observed Dubois, her fingers tightening around the leather-bound journal resting on the table between them, its edges worn from the many secrets it had been forced to contain. Her voice, when it finally broke the silence, was sharp, each word a deliberate strike. "Your plan, madame," she said, her tone as cold as the steel tracks beneath them, "was to secure the real artifact, by eliminating Harrington when he refused to cooperate." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment the train seemed to slow, as if it too were holding its breath. Dubois flinched, her fingers twitching towards her cigarette holder, but she said nothing. Agatha pressed on, relentless in her pursuit of truth. The blood trail in the luggage car was no accident. It was a deliberate move, meant to mislead and redirect suspicion. Dubois' lips parted, perhaps to protest, but Agatha's eyes hardened, silencing her with a glance. "And the device you carried, the one found in your possession, was no mere trinket. It was a sabotage tool, intended to derail the train, and wipe out all traces of your treachery, along with anyone who could expose you." Dubois shifted uncomfortably, but still, she did not speak. Silence descended like a heavy curtain, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the train as it cut through the night. Agatha's words cut through that silence again, each one deliberate, weighing the room with their finality. "Your plan failed, madame, and now the truth cannot be hidden any longer." The passengers in the cabin exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to speak. They were mere spectators now, watching as a web of deceit unraveled before their eyes. Dubois looked around desperately, as though hoping for some shred of solidarity from the others, but found nothing but cold eyes and judgment. Her shoulders slumped in defeat as she exhaled sharply, her body language surrendering to the inevitability of the situation. "Yes, I wanted the artifact," she said bitterly, her voice cracking with a mix of frustration and resignation. "And yes, Harrington was a fool, but it was Vassar who demanded his silence. If I hadn't acted, he would have killed me." Her eyes were frantic now, the panic rising to the surface. Agatha's gaze softened, but her resolve remained unchanged. "Perhaps, madame," she said, her voice carrying a quiet sympathy. But the choices you made were, and they have led us to this moment. Dubois slumped further into her seat, her defeat palpable, as the conductor, his face a study in grim determination, approached. "I'll see to it that she's detained until we reach the authorities," he said, his voice resolute, carrying the weight of duty. There was no argument, no hesitation, only the quiet finality of a job well done. The train, a vessel that had once carried the burden of lies and betrayal, now seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as it sped through the rolling hills toward its final destination. Outside, the night stretched endlessly, but within the walls of the Celestial Express, the oppressive tension was slowly giving way to a fragile peace. As the train began to slow, signaling their approach to the station, the passengers stirred, emerging from their cabins, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and tentative relief. They had lived through the storm. Now the quiet aftermath was theirs to experience. Evelyn Monteague, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, sat by the window, her gaze lost in thought. "I never thought," she murmured, almost to herself, but perhaps Harrington's theatrics had a purpose after all. Her voice was soft, tinged with a faint appreciation for the strange turn of events. Julian Blake, ever composed, couldn't suppress a dry chuckle. "A reminder perhaps," he offered, his tone flat but laden with the wisdom of experience, that ambition without caution often leads to folly. Agatha sat a short distance away, her presence barely noticeable yet undeniable, listening to the low murmur of the conversation swirling around her, satisfied that justice had found its path, however twisted it had been. The luxurious interiors of the Celestial Express, once a stage for deceit, betrayal and greed, now felt lighter, almost serene, as if the weight of the secrets they had carried had been lifted. The clink of luggage, the shuffle of feet on the polished floors, and the soft hum of the train were all that remained, a stark contrast to the tension that had once choked the air. As the train pulled into the bustling station, the passengers began to gather their belongings, eager to leave behind the tangled web of events they had witnessed. Agatha, too, prepared to disembark, her small suitcase clutched in her hand, the weight of the journey still pressing on her. Yet, as she stepped into the corridor, something unexpected happened. A folded piece of paper slipped from her belongings, fluttering to the floor. Agatha's sharp eyes caught it immediately, and she bent down to retrieve it. Her fingers brushed the paper, and her gaze flickered across the written words. "Well played, Miss Marple," the note began, "but the game is far from over." A faint, knowing smile curled at the corner of her lips, and she tucked the note into her pocket with deliberate care. The signature was unmistakable. Roland Vassar. His presence loomed over her, even from afar, a reminder that he had been orchestrating events from the shadows all along. His influence had reached further than she had anticipated. As the train doors slid open and the passengers began to step onto the platform, Agatha moved with quiet purpose, her mind already turning over the next steps in the game that was far from finished. For every shadow revealed, another one seemed to materialize just beyond the horizon. The Celestial Express had reached its final stop, but for Agatha Marple, the true journey was just beginning. The note in her pocket was more than a message. It was a challenge, and Agatha would not rest until she had uncovered the truth behind the game that Roland Vassar had set in motion. It was supposed to be an ordinary journey, just another luxury train ride across the rolling hills. But by the time the sun set, everything had changed. A death had been plotted in the shadows. A high-stakes game of betrayal and deception was unfolding at every turn, and Agatha Marple was the only one who could stop it. With every stop, another secret threatened to unravel the lives of all on board, and somewhere, hidden among the passengers, a mastermind was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Perdition-bound Celestial Express stood gleaming under the bright afternoon sun, its polished brass fittings glinting like buried treasure under a spotlight, and its deep mahogany panels whispered of forgotten royalty, each carved swirl seeming to hold a secret lost in time. On the platform, porters in sharp navy uniforms moved with practiced urgency, hoisting trunks and whispering to one another in clipped tones, as if aware that this was no ordinary journey, but something laced with shadows. The steam hissed rhythmically from the engine, merging with the refined chatter of Europe's elite, whose elegant smiles and precise laughter masked more than just privilege. They hid stories, motives, and long-buried sins. From amidst this carefully controlled chaos, emerged a quiet figure, Detective Agatha Marple, her grey travelling suit modest, her posture reserved, as if she were a retired governess or a countryside librarian. But her eyes, sharp, calculating, and dispassionate, betrayed a mind that missed nothing, registering every twitch, every too confident grin, every glance that lingered too long. Her gaze caught a man berating a porter, loud and impatient. Dr. Peril Harrington, the famed and flamboyant archaeologist known for his theatrics as much as his discoveries. His golden pocket watch and grand gestures as loud as his ego. Following him closely was a woman, Dr. Evelyn Monteague, clutching a leather case like it contained something far more volatile than notes or tools. Her face rigid with self-control, the kind of control forged in resentment, the kind that eventually erupts. Agatha's ticket was checked by the conductor, whose polite voice masked a wariness she instantly noted, and as she stepped into the train, it was like entering a traveling palace. Crystal chandeliers, casting a soft glow over plush velvet seats embroidered with ancient motifs, and ornaments that carried the faint scent of distant markets. Her cabin was modest but serene, a neat bed tucked beside the window, that offered one last view of the platform's orchestrated dance before the train began its slow departure. In the salon car, the atmosphere was already theatrical. Champagne glasses clinked like chimes of anticipation, polished laughter floated like perfume. But every smile, every toast, was a move in a quiet, calculated game. Agatha sipped her tea in silence until her gaze landed on Sir Julian Blake, exuding curated charm amidst a circle of admirers. A man who didn't just command wealth, but people, his influence threaded into every word he spoke. Across the car, dramatic entrance of Madame Isabelle Dubois caused a visible shift in air, her sapphire gown shimmering like a lure, her cigarette poised in a holder like a statement, and her low predatory smile, giving her the aura of a dangerous riddle. When her eyes met Harrington's, his posture stiffened, not out of awe, but guilt, as if some memory had crawled out of its grave. As the train eased forward, the room subtly shifted, alliances forming, roles assumed, enemies identified without a word. A steward moved through champagne with an expression too controlled to be casual, his eyes flickering between Harrington and Dubois, like he'd seen something he shouldn't have. "Curious, isn't it?" came a voice beside Agatha, a soft, oddly knowing murmur from the conductor, who lingered just long enough to suggest he knew the journey held more than sights and scenery. "Every journey carries a lesson," Agatha replied quietly, her eyes scanning the room again, noticing the way people posed, listened or avoided. The salon car had become a stage, and as Harrington dramatically opened a carved wooden box to reveal a jet-black obsidian disc etched with ancient faintly glowing runes, he declared, "A relic from a forgotten civilization. Priceless, yes, but possibly dangerous." And though everyone gasped and murmured in admiration, Agatha watched the performance with practiced detachment, noting the subtle tension in the steward's hands, the tightness in Evelyn's jaw, and the way Sir Julian raised his glass and said with a sly smirk, "Dangerous, how delightfully dramatic," his laughter followed by others. Though Harrington's smile faltered, just for a moment, that was all it took for Agatha to know. This wasn't a mere voyage, this was a psychological chess game, where each move, each word, each flicker of the eye could unravel buried truth. And she had just witnessed the first ripple of a much deeper storm. Unlike others who wasted away their lives swapping stock tips and gossiping about others' ambitions in hushed tones, I had never found solace in passive indulgence. I thrived where shadows thickened and truth squirmed beneath layers of performance. Julian's lips curled into a diplomatic smile, yet his eyes hardened like flint, the faintest edge to his voice betraying what civility tried to disguise. "Unlike some, I value discretion over reckless ambition. The words match in a gas-lit room, igniting the air with unsaid provocations. Around them reactions stirred like a ripple across still water. Evelyn Monty, poised and sharp, smirked just enough to let her contempt flicker through. Madame Isabelle Dubois, with her ever-glamorous cigarette holder, exhaled a precise plume of smoke, and raised one brow, her silence louder than speech. Agatha Marple watched from her corner like a predator cloaked in calm, absorbing the tiny cracks forming beneath their cultivated poise. The Celestial Express drifted smoothly through the darkened countryside, a mechanical masterpiece of opulence and order, but beneath the champagne sparkle of its corridors, some darker had begun to pulse. Agatha's soft-soled shoes made no sound as she slipped away, drawn by a quiet intuition that often arrived like a whisper in her spine, and she had learned never to ignore. The luggage car greeted her with a chill, its sterile organization a sharp contrast to the lavish salon. Here, the air felt denser, like it had absorbed too many secrets too tightly packed to breathe. She stepped through rows of meticulously tagged trunks, her eyes scanning for anomalies. And there it was, a shadow, a flicker of movement vanishing behind the towering cases. Her pulse surged, but she remained silent, her breath shallow, her steps quieter still. The faintest rustle reached her ear, then the scrape of leather on wood. Hurried, panicked. Someone was hiding, or running. Her hand grazed a trunk for balance, and there between two stacked cases she spotted a sliver of paper, tucked hastily. She unfolded it, careful not to crinkle it too loudly. The message was blunt, ink smeared in haste. Keep your distance or there will be consequences. A warning or perhaps a promise. Her mouth tightened into a grim line, the note trembling slightly between her fingers. No intention of turning away. The truth always bit hardest when it was closest to the surface. Just as she turned, a soft click echoed behind her. A lock being sealed, a compartment shutting tight. She froze, listening. The figure was gone, but the chill lingered, as though something unseen had slipped past her. The Celestial Express, for all its grandeur, was becoming a vessel of tensions too tightly coiled to later a light elegance, its guests pretending camaraderie beneath crystal chandeliers. But Agatha saw the shift, the nervous twitch in a nobleman's hand, the way Sir Julian's voice carried a little too loud, as if to fill a void that shouldn't be there. She sat near the window, her tea forgotten, eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles cataloguing details, like a surgeon mapping nerve clusters. Dr. Evelyn's eyes darted toward a closed door. A cufflink glinted oddly from a man's sleeve, mismatched she noted. And then the train lurched, an unexpected, almost rebellious jolt that shattered the rhythm like a glass struck wrong. Gasps rose, brandy sloshed dangerously. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. "Good heavens!" cried Sir Julian. The conductor arrived swiftly, words smooth, face composed. "Just a minor mechanical issue. Nothing to fear," he assured them. But fear had already entered. Quietly, unnoticed. Dr. Harrington muttered under his breath about cut corners and cheap engineering, clutching a dark wooden box so tightly his knuckles went pale, as though it held something far more precious or dangerous than anyone knew. As the train resumed its glide, laughter returned, but it was thin and hesitant now, eyes shifting more than lips moved. Agatha watched, her mind sharpening around the pattern forming, invisible but unmistakable. That jolt had revealed, not just mechanical fragility, fissures. In the dining car, where polished silverware and rich aromas had once promised calm, unease simmered just beneath the surface. Agatha sat still, untouched, her gaze skating across faces too eager to. This was not just a train. It had become a stage, and somewhere among the applause and polite smiles, someone was hiding a very dangerous truth. The true journey, she knew now, had only just begun. The hushed voices at the far end of the car cut through the low hum of conversation, pulling Agatha's attention like a magnet. "A theft, you say? But how?" And who would dare? The words came in a rush, their urgency palpable. The voices belonged to Dr. Montague, whose usual composure seemed to waver, and a young steward, his nervous energy betraying his unease. Agatha's spoon hovered midair, her sharp eyes flicking toward the source of the conversation. She could only catch fragments. Words like priceless and artifact were unmistakable, hanging in the air like a dark omen. The steward's voice dropped lower, barely a whisper, though Agatha strained to hear every word. It was in his possession. I saw it myself. It's worth more than the entire train, I swear. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Then it's still here, Dr. Montague replied, his tone sharp, filled with restrained fury. No one could leave without being noticed. Agatha's expression remained placid, but her mind raced. The pieces of this puzzle were beginning to click together, yet the image they formed was still murky, shrouded in a haze of secrets and lies. Harrington's earlier theatrics with his so-called artifact, combined with the steward's desperate tone, hinted at something far darker, a mystery that could erupt into chaos with a single misstep. Before she could process further, Madame Isabelle Dubois swept into the car, her presence so commanding it almost seemed to bend the very air around her. With a slow, deliberate movement, she paused at the entrance, her sharp eyes scanning the room, before locking onto Dr. Harrington, seated 2 tables away. A faint, enigmatic smile curled at the edges of her lips, a smile that spoke of hidden knowledge and long-held secrets. She turned then, heading toward her own table, but not before giving the doctor a lingering, almost possessive look. Agatha's curiosity deepened, sharpening like a blade. The tension surrounding Harrington and his artifact was thickening, each glance and word adding layers to a growing storm. Somewhere within this microcosm of power, wealth and intrigue, lay the threads of a much larger mystery, one Agatha was determined to unravel. The mood in the Celestial Express had shifted, irrevocably. What had begun as a voyage of comfort, luxury, and endless possibilities, now felt like a performance in a theater, where every actor had a role to play, a secret to protect, and a truth to hide. Agatha Marple, quiet and unassuming, had no intention of being just a spectator. No, she would be the one to unmask the truth hidden behind every glance, every word, every move. The dining car, an opulent masterpiece of indulgence, was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. The light flickered and danced on polished silver platters, its reflections bouncing off crystal glasses, sparkling like distant stars caught in the night. The voices of the passengers hummed like a well-tuned orchestra, blending seamlessly into a symphony of idle chatter and soft laughter. That is, until Dr. Harrington rose from his seat, cutting through the air with the precision of a conductor's baton. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice grandiose and slightly slurred, "I beg your indulgence for a moment of intellectual enlightenment." Agatha, seated on the edge of the room, allowed herself a fleeting smile. Dr. Harrington's theatrics were as much a part of the evening as the wine, the crystal, and the rich perfumed air that filled the room. He held up a small wooden box, the same one he had guarded earlier with obsessive fervor, his hands trembling as he slowly opened it. A disk of obsidian gleamed darkly in the flickering candlelight, its surface reflecting the light in a way that seemed almost unnatural. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and all eyes locked on the object. "This," Dr. Harrington announced, his voice tinged with reverence and self-importance, "is no mere trinket unearthed from the sands of Anatolia. It is an artifact of immense historical and, dare I say, mystical value." He paused for effect, scanning the room with the air of a man who believed himself to be the center of the universe. Madame Isabelle leaned forward, the delicate cigarette holder between her fingers almost an extension of her poised elegance. Her voice was soft, seductive, dripping with curiosity. "How intriguing, Dr. Harrington," she purred, her eyes never leaving the artifact. "One wonders, what makes it so dangerous that you felt compelled to warn us all?" Harrington's expression faltered for a brief moment, his eyes narrowing. "That, madam, is knowledge reserved only for the worthy." Across the table Dr. Evelyn Monteith scoffed, her sharp features twisting with disdain. "The worthy," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "All those who shout the loudest. Your discovery, as you call it, was built on a foundation of theft and deceit." A ripple of gasps spread through the room, the passengers exchanging uncertain glances, unsure of where the conversation would lead. Monteith's fists clenched on the tablecloth, her body trembling with fury. Harrington's voice dropped low, the tension palpable in every word. "Careful, Evelyn," he warned, his tone like a predator stalking its prey. "Jealousy does not suit you, nor does fraud." "Fraud?" Monteith's voice was thick with venom. "That artifact, if it is truly what you claim, belongs in a museum, not your pompous little circus act." The air in the dining car crackled with electric tension, the murmurs of the other passengers fading into the background. Agatha, who had been watching the scene unfold with quiet interest, sipped her tea, her gaze flicking back and forth between the two combatants. If words could wound, she thought, then the train would surely need a medic by morning. The rest of the evening passed in an unsettling hush. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the subtle sway of the train, but the usual hum of conversation had all but vanished, replaced by an almost tangible silence. Agatha's instincts told her that something had changed, shifted. The moment she sat down at her table, the steward attending to her seemed different, jittery, nervous, his eyes darting constantly toward the door. Agatha's keen eyes caught his unease immediately. "What's the matter?" she inquired gently, her voice soft but commanding. "It's Dr. Harrington, madam," the steward whispered, his voice strained. "He's not in his cabin." Agatha's eyebrow arched, an expression of mild curiosity crossing her face. Unusual, but hardly alarming. "Perhaps he's taken himself to some other part of the train." But the steward's response was far more unsettling. "There's more, madam," he continued, his voice barely audible now. His cabin door was open, and there was blood, a trail leading toward the luggage car. Agatha's teacup froze halfway to her lips. Without hesitation, she set it down gently on the table, her mind already shifting into high gear. "Take me there," she said, her voice calm, controlled, the authority of someone used to taking charge. The corridor leading to Dr. Harrington's cabin was eerily silent, the movements of the train's interior now a stark contrast to the rising tension in the air. The soft tap of Agatha's heels against the polished floor was the only sound, a rhythmic beat that seemed to echo in the stillness. As they neared Harrington's cabin, the weight of something unseen pressed against Agatha's chest, thickening the air with each step. There was a presence here, something dark, something dangerous. She could feel it. The game had shifted. This was no longer just a mystery to be solved. It had become something far more deadly. The steward hesitated at the threshold of the cabin, his face ashen, and then with a reluctant gesture, he swept his hand toward the door, revealing the disarray inside. The scene was chilling in its implications. A chair overturned, a shattered glass glittering on the plush carpet, and most tellingly, the box that had once contained Dr. Harrington's precious artifact was nowhere to be found. A faint but unmistakable trail of blood, dark, stark against the carpet, led toward the back of the train. Agatha knelt by the doorway, her sharp, observant eyes scanning the wreckage with meticulous care. "This was no mere robbery," she murmured, more to herself than to the steward. "It was far worse. Dr. Harrington, if he was still alive, would be lucky to remain so much longer." Without hesitation, she followed the blood-stained trail toward the luggage car. The air inside grew thick, the smell of Polish and aged leather mingling with the oppressive silence. Agatha's movements were deliberate, calculated, each step silent, as if the very air around her held its breath. The blood-stained trail ended abruptly at a steamer trunk, its lid slightly ajar. She opened it slowly, revealing nothing but neatly folded clothing inside. A distraction, she realized with a jolt of frustration. A decoy. Her mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of the puzzle. Dr. Harrington's disappearance was no random event. It had been orchestrated, and whatever had happened, it was clear that the Celestial Express was no longer a mere vehicle of luxury. It had become a deadly game of cat and mouse. As she moved back down the corridor, her thoughts were interrupted by the steward, who still lingered nervously in the doorway. "I didn't see him after that," he stammered, his voice shaky. "But I did hear shouting later, near the luggage car. Thought nothing of it, nothing out of the ordinary." Agatha fixed him with a cold, piercing gaze. "Nothing on this train is ever ordinary," she replied, her voice low and foreboding. The luggage car, when she entered, presented a study in eerie contrast. The meticulous organization of trunks and bags stood in stark opposition to the tension that gripped the air, as if every item held its breath, aware of the catastrophe that had unfolded. Agatha moved with purpose through the narrow aisles, her trained eyes scanning for any sign of irregularity. Near the rear of the car, she paused. There, in the gleaming surface of a trunk, was a faint smudge of blood, stark and terrifying. Beside it, partially crumpled, was a piece of paper. She retrieved it carefully, smoothing it out. It was a torn page from Dr. Harrington's notebook, scrawled with fragmented notes in his distinctive handwriting. "The disk must remain hidden. If exposed, the consequences will be unthinkable. D suspects too much. Montague is no better." The page ended abruptly, the rest of the note lost to a jagged tear. Agatha's expression remained impassive, though her mind raced, trying to unravel the meaning behind those cryptic words. The absence of the artifact was as telling as its presence would have been. The compartment inside the trunk was empty, the velvet lining untouched. Someone had been thorough. By the time she returned to the Grand Salon car, the atmosphere aboard the train had shifted. Whispers filled the air, soft and hurried. The usual hum of social activity was replaced by an undercurrent of suspicion and fear. "It's Montague, I'm sure of it," a young woman whispered, her pearls glinting under the soft lighting. "He's always had it out for Harrington. Everyone knows it." "Nonsense," a gentleman with a waxed mustache countered. "It's Due's more likely. She has connections to the black market." Agatha, leaning casually against a column, overheard the exchange but said nothing. Her eyes, however, were sharply focused on Sir Julian Blake, who sat lounging with apparent indifference. "This is why I avoid relics," he commented dryly. "They attract far too much unpleasantness." Agatha stepped forward, her voice smooth, yet carrying an edge. "Unpleasantness, or opportunity, Sir Julian?" she asked. His lips quirked, a faint smile playing at the corners. "Opportunity, perhaps," he replied, "but only for the foolish or desperate. I am neither, madame." At that moment Madame de Bourgh, watching from the periphery, stepped forward, her sapphire gown shimmering in the soft glow of the chandeliers. The atmosphere in the room was electric with tension, every whisper, every glance, laden with suspicion. The stakes were higher than ever, and the path to unraveling the mystery had only just begun. As the train sliced through the night, its polished steel exterior gleaming in the pale moonlight, an oppressive silence settled over the Celestial Express. Inside, the once opulent salon had transformed into a claustrophobic stage, where suspicion hung heavy in the air. Agatha Marple, ever the observant guest, sat quietly at the periphery of the room, her gaze scanning the faces around her. Each one, seemingly innocent, betrayed hints of hidden truths, their eyes shifting, their words faltering as if trapped within a web they couldn't escape. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, as though the train itself had become a vessel of secrets too dark to be confessed. Dr. Evelyn Montague, who had been sitting across from Agatha, finally broke the silence, her voice carrying the weight of years of unspoken resentment. "He was nothing but a charlatan." Montague spat, the words leaving her lips like venom, though her attempt to composed, the trembling of her hands as they tugged nervously at the hem of her perfectly tailored suit. I should have seen it coming. He had no respect for anyone but himself. Especially me. Agatha, unfazed, studied Montague's reaction with the precision of a seasoned detective. And yet, she murmured, her voice deceptively soft, a charlatan rarely incites such emotion. What exactly did Dr. Harrington do to provoke this level of anger? Montague's gaze flickered, and Agatha caught the fleeting moment of vulnerability, a crack in her otherwise cold demeanor. He took credit for my work, Montague continued, her voice growing sharper, almost desperate. Years of research, my discoveries, reduced to a mere footnote under his name. The artifact, the one he paraded as his own, he didn't even find it. He bought it from a shady dealer, a man whose reputation is as questionable as Harrington's. Her voice dropped lower, becoming almost a whisper, as if the very mention of the truth was too dangerous. But no one ever knew that. He was too clever for that. Agatha leaned forward ever so slightly, her expression unreadable. And did you ever confront him about it? She asked, her words calculated to probe deeper. Montague's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a bitter smile. Confront him? No. He was untouchable. But murder? No. Miss Marple. That's not my style. Agatha studied Montague carefully, weighing the sincerity in her words against the rage that simmered beneath the surface. Meanwhile, across the room, Madame Isabelle Dubus stood near the window, her silhouette a striking contrast against the darkened landscape. Her emerald silk gown shimmered under the faint light, a portrait of elegance and restraint. Yet, as Agatha approached, she could sense the subtle shift in the air, the way the room seemed to hold its breath as if waiting for something, anything to break the tension. Quite the view, Agatha remarked lightly, her tone nonchalant, but there was a deeper current running through her words, an undercurrent of quiet interrogation. Dubus, for her part, didn't flinch, her smile unfaltering, but Agatha saw the slightest flicker in her eyes, a spark of recognition, or perhaps fear. Yes, Dubus replied, her voice smooth but with an edge that only someone like Agatha could catch. Though I find the company aboard this train far more intriguing than the scenery. Agatha didn't miss the hidden meaning in Dubus's words. Speaking of company, she continued, I couldn't help but wonder about your relationship with Dr. Harrington. A shared appreciation for artifacts, perhaps. Dubus's eyes flashed, but her smile remained intact, a mask that hid her true emotions. Harrington, she said slowly, exhaling a plume of smoke, was ambitious. A man of great potential, though reckless. His obsession with rare and valuable items often led him down questionable paths. Agatha's gaze never wavered. Such as Roland Ver? She asked, the name hanging in the air like a weighted accusation. Dubus's smile tightened, but she only laughed softly, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ver's name is often whispered in hushed tones, isn't it? A convenient scapegoat for those unwilling to face the truth of their own involvement. But knowledge is not a crime, Miss Marple, she added with a cool calmness that made Agatha's skin crawl. If you're searching for a villain, perhaps you should look closer at Dr. Harrington's other associates. Greed, ambition, enemies, they all leave their marks. Agatha allowed the words to settle, her mind already spinning the threads together. Dubus was a master of deflection, her charm too carefully constructed, her composure too practiced. It was the hallmark of someone hiding something, perhaps more than one secret. As Agatha made her way back to the observation car, her thoughts turned inward, each piece of the puzzle fitting together in a way that didn't quite make sense. She settled into a quiet corner, the gentle hum of the train's engine lulling her into a moment of reflection. A steward passed by, offering tea and biscuits, and Agatha accepted with a murmured thanks. As she reached for her saucer, however, her fingers brushed against something unexpected. A folded note, hidden beneath the edge of the cup. Agatha's pulse quickened, a chill running through her as she unfolded the message. The handwriting was uneven, frantic, as though written in haste. The words were simple yet deeply unsettling. Beware the shadows. They see more than you think. Agatha's mind raced, turning the words over and over. But the cryptic nature of the warning only deepened the mystery. Shadows. What could they mean? Were they a reference to someone? Or perhaps something more intangible? A force lurking just beneath the surface? The ambiguity gnawed at her, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the warning held more weight than it appeared. The train continued its journey, the oppressive air of secrecy thickening with each passing moment. Agatha Marple, ever the sharp observer, knew that the truth, whatever it was buried deep beneath layers of lies and deceit. But she was determined to find it, even if it meant unmasking the darkness hiding in the very shadows that watched her every move. The Celestial Express hummed steadily through the vast expanse of the night, its polished exterior gleaming under the moon's watchful gaze. Yet inside, a palpable unease crept beneath the luxurious veneer. Agatha Marple stood by the window, her eyes scanning the passengers, their casual postures betraying none of the tension that hung thick in the air, like an invisible weight pressing down on them all. The bright afternoon sun had long since disappeared, and with it the last semblance of comfort had been replaced by a creeping sense of menace that refused to dissipate. Slipping the strange note into her pocket, Agatha's face remained a picture of calm, yet inside, her resolve had deepened. Whoever had orchestrated Dr. Harrington's disappearance and sent her this warning was watching, and Agatha Marple was determined to turn the tables. The luggage car was a world away from the opulent salons of the train, bathed in a dim flickering light that cast long unnerving shadows across the neatly stacked trunks and crates. The rhythmic clatter of the train's wheels was hypnotic, broken only by the occasional creak of shifting luggage. As she moved quietly down the narrow aisle, her sharp eyes darted from one corner to another, her instincts honed through years of careful observation sensing that this was no ordinary search. There was something here, something hidden, awaiting her discovery. She crouched before a battered trunk, the initials HW hastily stamped on its side, her gloved fingers testing the latch. It opened easily, an oddity for a man so protective of his possessions. Just as she lifted the lid, a faint sound reached her ears, a whisper of movement, a scuff of leather on wood. Instantly, her body tensed, every muscle alert. She froze, her mind calculating the next move, the pulse of her heartbeat in her ears. Then, in a flash, the figure lunged from the shadows, an arm reaching out to grab her. But Agatha was faster. She sidestepped with a fluidity that belied her unassuming appearance, the figure stumbling forward with a curse, vanishing back into the dark recesses of the car. Her heartbeat slowed as she regained composure, her mind already assessing the situation. The trunks were overturned, a faint dusting of footprints left behind where the intruder had stood. Whoever they were, they had something to hide. And now so did she. The Grand Salon, once a place of leisure and polite conversation, now felt suffocating, its opulence overshadowed by the air of guarded suspicion that filled the room. The passengers, once comfortably ensconced in their pleasantries, now exchanged clipped words and furtive glances, their smiles strained and false. Sir Julian Blake, perched near the window with a glass of brandy in hand, appeared outwardly at ease, but Agatha noted the tension in his shoulders, and the way his eyes darted uneasily when he noticed her approach. She slid into the chair opposite him, her expression cool, her voice steady. "Sir Julian," she began, her words tinged with curiosity, "I've been meaning to ask, what drew you to sponsor Dr. Harrington's work? Archaeology seems an unusual pursuit for someone with your varied interests." His lips quirked in a faint, calculating smile, though his eyes held a guarded glint. "Ah, Miss Marple, you're as sharp as ever. Let's call it an investment in history, or perhaps an opportunity." His gaze met hers, and Agatha saw the flicker of something deeper, something that barely scratched the surface. "Opportunity," she echoed, leaning slightly forward. "Harrington had a knack for finding things others couldn't," he continued, his tone casual, but Agatha caught the way his voice tightened. His methods were unconventional, yes, but the results were often lucrative. Lucrative enough to risk a reputation. His smile remained, but it didn't reach his eyes. Agatha's own smile faltered slightly as she processed his words. "So you valued the financial over the personal?" she asked, her tone casual, but laced with subtle accusation. "I regret the loss of his work, but my involvement ended at funding his expeditions," Blake replied coolly, as though dismissing her probing. Agatha nodded, her gaze never leaving his, as she mentally noted the implications of his detached attitude. A man concerned only with financial gain would rarely mourn the loss of a colleague. Back in Harrington's cabin, the air was heavy with the remnants of chaos left by the earlier search. Agatha's practiced hands methodically sifted through the contents of the scattered luggage. Beneath the disarray, she found a hidden compartment in a leather satchel, and inside, a velvet pouch tied tightly with a silk cord. Unwrapping it carefully, she revealed a disc of polished obsidian, the very artifact Dr. Harrington had so dramatically displayed. But something was off. The weight was wrong, and the surface was too smooth, lacking the subtle imperfections that came with ancient relics. Holding it to the light, Agatha noticed faint, almost imperceptible machine marks along the edges. "A counterfeit," she murmured, both amused and frustrated by the revelation. The implications were immediate and damning. If Harrington's prized artifact was a forgery, then what had happened to the real one? And who among the passengers knew enough to exploit it? Her mind whirled with possibilities, the walls of the Celestial Express suddenly feeling much too close. This was no ordinary theft. It was a carefully constructed deception, driven by greed and desperation. Slipping the counterfeit back into its hiding place, Agatha's thoughts raced, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place, but leaving her with more questions than answers. As she exited the cabin, the oppressive sense of being watched returned, the shadows around her stretching and shifting like living things, hiding secrets beneath their cloak. The train's opulent facade had begun to crack under the weight of its passengers' lies. The conductor's quarters were a stark contrast to the rest of the train, small, functional, and orderly, a reflection of the man himself. Agatha sat opposite him, the hum of the train filling the silence between them. As she studied him, her mind turned over the fragments of information she had gathered. There was more to this mystery than met the eye, and Agatha Marple, sharp-eyed and unyielding, was determined to uncover it all, no matter where the trail led her. The tension aboard the Celestial Express had reached an almost palpable crescendo. Agatha Marple's gaze lingered on the man seated across from her, his composed demeanor belying the strain evident in his every movement. Mr. Petro's weathered face, usually an open book, betrayed more elusive today, a secret hovering just beneath the surface. She spoke softly, her words measured yet sharp. "You notice things, Mr. Petro. In a setting like one learns to listen, even when not directly addressed." Petro sighed, his fingers tapping anxiously against the edge of the table. Finally he spoke, his voice thick with hesitation. "I overheard Dr. Harrington the night he disappeared. He was arguing with someone in the corridor. I didn't see who, but the voices, they were heated." Agatha leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "And what did they say?" Petro's eyes darkened as he recounted the words. Harrington accused the other person of betrayal. He said something about the safety of the artifact. "If this gets out, we're all ruined." The implication hung in the air like a loaded gun, its weight sinking deep into Agatha's thoughts. She probed further, "And the other voice? A man or a woman?" "A man," Petro answered after a moment of contemplation. But his voice was low, almost a whisper, the kind of voice meant to fade into memory. Agatha's expression remained unchanged, but inside her mind raced. "A calculated voice," she murmured, her tone contemplative. The conversation shifted as Petro leaned in, his voice dropping. "This train, Miss Marple, it feels different, like it's carrying more than just passengers. Something dangerous is aboard." Agatha gave a small knowing smile. Trains are curious things, Mr. Petro. They carry us, yet they also propel us into places we can't always control. Meanwhile, the dining car had fallen into an eerie quiet, the clinking of silverware now replaced by hushed whispers and nervous glances. A young steward had vanished without a trace, and rumors swirled in the air like smoke. Agatha's entrance brought a strange sense of calm, her presence a stark contrast to the growing panic. One woman, her voice trembling, whispered, "They found blood near the service car, a glove covered in it." Agatha approached Sir Julian Blake, whose usual poise seemed strained under the pressure of the mystery unfolding. His response to her casual observation about the vanishing staff was delivered with his signature smirk, but the sharpness in Agatha's gaze caught him off guard. "Perhaps we should disembark and save ourselves the theatrics," he quipped. Agatha raised an eyebrow. "And yet you remain remarkably composed, Sir Julian. A trait born of experience, I presume." "Experience teaches one not to panic, Miss Marple. It also teaches the value of keeping certain truths to oneself," he replied, his voice smooth, but the faintest hint of discomfort clouded his eyes. Agatha's reply was swift. Wise advice, though one must discern between wisdom and avoidance. As she moved through the corridors of the train, Agatha's mind remained focused on the web of deception unraveling around her. Her next stop was Madame Dobbs' cabin, where the elegant woman's poised exterior masked a world of secrets. The two women exchanged terse words, Agatha revealing a map hidden within Harrington's belongings, a map marked with Dobbs' initials. A professional interest, or something more profitable? Agatha asked pointedly. The tension in Madame Dobbs' eyes flared, and Agatha caught the subtle shift in her posture. "You are clever, Miss Marple," Dobb warned, her voice laced with something almost threatening. "Too clever. But be careful. There are things aboard this train that are best left undisturbed." Agatha's response was calm, but her mind was racing. "Is that a warning for me, madame? Or for yourself?" As Agatha left Dobbs' cabin, her thoughts churned with the implications. Every conversation, every encounter on this train, added another layer to the puzzle she was determined to solve. The Celestial Express, with its ornate decor and seemingly serene atmosphere, was anything but peaceful. It was a vessel carrying lies, deceit, and secrets too dangerous to remain hidden. The walls of the train seemed to close in on her, but Agatha knew she was getting closer to the truth. The Grand Salon was quieter than usual, its opulent charm tainted by the unease that now gripped its passengers. Dr. Egg, a woman not easily rattled, approached Agatha with caution. "I believe we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Agatha, always keen for insight, turned her full attention to the doctor. The truth was close now, and Agatha Marple intended to find it, no matter where it led. Dr. Monteague stood in front of Agatha, her figure tense with a palpable urgency that betrayed the weight of the secret she was about to unveil. The train car around them was empty, save for the hum of the wheels beneath them, and the occasional creak of the old weathered wood. Agatha regarded her quietly, a glint of curiosity in her calm gaze. "I've been withholding the truth, Miss Marple," Monteague confessed, her voice low, almost hesitant. "But recent events have shown me that keeping silent might cost us everything. Harrington was no mere fraud. He was reckless, entangled in dangerous dealings with someone even more dangerous. Roland Vasa." She paused, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if to steady herself against the weight of her admission. "I don't know all the details, but I overheard enough to know that Vasa wasn't just a name. It was that tied everything together. I have reason to believe Vasa's dealings are the key to Harrington's disappearance."